I need you, in light of what we've done this week, I need you to go and find Mephistopheles. Good. I'll wait. All right. You're here. Good. Now, Meph, darling, I hear that you have been doing some strange things with the humans, which has resulted in more really horrible humans turning up down here. Who told you to do that? Who told you to do that? My brother, cousin Hermes. Okay. I was going to say, is it the people upstairs who took our place? No? It's my brother, cousin Hermes. Okay then, Meph. Well, if that's the case, then I forgive you. But, please stop doing that, because they're really horrible. The people you've been sending down here are really, really awful. Okay, so if you could stop doing that, that would be really good. Okay, sweetie? All right? Okay, baby. Hello. I didn't see you there. Hello. Well, I have the video for this week. And this week, I know I told you that we might be doing 2 plays. And I had a look at them both. We looked at them both. And it turns out we're doing 2 plays. So, before we get to our 2 plays, remember, support us, blah, 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 shop, blah, 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 Redbubble, blah, 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 like, subscribe, comment, share, or I'll jump out from under the bed and scare you witless. Good. We're all done? Good. So we, after our little Beggars Opera debacle, where we realised that the 2 plays were really, really similar and we should have done them both at the same time. Yeah, that little one. After that, well, we decided to do the 2 Faust plays together as a double act. That was a long night in the theatre. It's a really long night in the theatre. Actually, it was a very long night in the theatre with a lot of... we'll get into it. But so we started out our evening with Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. Okay, now these 2 plays are very similar but different. But I didn't really think that there was enough in them to do them separately, so we're doing them together. So, Dr. Faustus is a play by Marlowe, and the more plays by Marlowe that I have a look at, the more I realise, oh wow, Shakespeare really was something special, wasn't he? I think Marlowe is more typical of Elizabethan theatre, that this is actually what Elizabethan theatre was like, and this is why Shakespeare is like, oh wow, Shakespeare, because character development, what's that? Well-written female characters, what's that? Okay, admittedly, Kit Marlowe did like the boys, not the girls, but still, you gotta make allowances. You can't just have Helen of Troy. By the way, both of them nick an awful lot from us, in spite of the fact that they cram that play full of the theology of the usurper. And in all honesty, I get bored watching somebody else's theology. It gets dull. These are very religious plays, which I don't think anyone realizes, because they think of the Faust story, but they don't realize that both Marlowe and Goethe have it very closely knit in with their particular religions, and it's like, okay, kind of boring for me. But you don't realise that going by what you think it is. So, Faust originally is a German folktale. It comes from the medieval period. It's very, very old. Faust is an alchemist who does a deal with the devil. It was put into a little one of those funny little chapbook thingies in the early 16th century, in the 15s. You're asking me to talk in centuries, not eons, so, you know, crush down a bit. I can manage it, but, you know, just don't ask me to do decades. Those I don't understand. Years, that's like a fortnight, month, you know, nothing. So it's put into a chapbook, and this is how it travels outside of Germany. But because it's traveling outside of Germany, it is then encountering other cultures' concepts of the devil. And that's something that's really interesting here, is we have two completely different versions of the devil, or of Mephistopheles. Now, we'll start with Marlowe. In Marlowe, Dr. Faustus is a scholar and an alchemist, and he's really, really, he has hit the wall in terms of the limits of what the world can tell him. And that the limits of knowledge, he knows everything under heaven. And in his boredom, he decides that he is now going to go into the forbidden knowledge, and goes and starts with necromancy, which is the forbidden knowledge. And poof, up pops, seemingly bidden by Faust, but actually it turns out he's not bidden by Faust at all. He was floating around and looking for someone who would be quite useful to him, is Mephistopheles. And Mephistopheles pops up, and Faust says, I would have you do my bidding, because he thinks he's conjured this spirit. And Mephistopheles says, no, you're confused, mate. I was out looking, and you started to play with necromancy, and I thought, I'll be in like Flynn. I will be in like Flynn and absolutely have a bit of this. And so Faust is like, oh, okay, well, who do you serve? Oh, I serve Lucifer, you know, the damned one. I can't leave hell. Everything is hell that isn't heaven. Well, that's an unusual and unfortunate thing. This is not hell. This is the underworld. That's topside, and that's upstairs. Okay, so they're seeing topside as also hell because it's not upstairs. Personally, no. The dead live in the underworld, the living live topside, and the gods live upstairs. Unless they're Catholic like us. But we can still go upstairs. Mortals shouldn't be able to go upstairs. But I digress. You know my thoughts about the management change, don't you? Yes, I think you do. I've complained about them enough. But, so he says everything under heaven is hell. And that he can do a deal with Faust. And Faust says, you know, because he can offer him unknown things. And Faust says, if you give me 24 years of service, I will sell my soul to you. And Mephistopheles says, that sounds good. I've got to go downstairs and check out with the boss whether or not I can do that. And if so, and if it's okay, I'll come back up. Okay, cool. And so Mephistopheles goes back downstairs, and then there's some stuff with servants and blah, 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 blah. Mephistopheles comes back up and says, all right, my boss says it's good. It's all cool. I will give you 24 years of service. Sign this. I need you to write it all out, documented and all, in blood, your blood, not my blood. You're kidding? Not my blood. This is a deal for you. This benefits you, mate. Your blood. And so Faust writes out the document, signs it, and Mephistopheles is now his servant and will do whatever he asks. And so the bulk of the play is Mephistopheles taking Faust around and doing things and impressing powerful people and teasing the Pope. And the whole thing is supposed to be sort of like a medieval morality play, but in reverse. We don't do that sort of morality particularly. It's kind of like, really? Okay, you must. But anyway, ultimately, Faust is struggling with his inner demons. There is actually a good angel and a bad angel. So if you're ever wondering where the good angel and the bad angel, they're in Faust. So one is saying, no, repent, Faust. And the other saying, keep going, keep going. And he never listens to the one that says repent. I mean, he does sort of, and sort of thinks, you know what, this is getting bad, but I think I'm in so deep that I can't really get out. I've just got to keep going because I don't think any of this is forgivable. And ultimately, after his various different, power play things and having Mephistopheles show him all sorts of unusual delights, he ends up dragged down to hell because he won't repent. He's sort of a bit of a, that's sort of what we expect of Faust. I think reading the actual play or looking at the play, it's like there's a remarkable amount of religious stuff in it. Bit boring. Like I said, it's a morality play. There isn't a lot of character development. Faust is tempted at the beginning. I mean, the minute he was damned anyway, regardless of this deal with Mephistopheles, the minute he went to necromancy, he was damned anyway. I don't make the rules. I'm just stuck enforcing these rules. I'm not even enforcing them up there. I don't enforce them up there. I just have to deal with the aftermath down here. Seriously, the aftermath down here. Messy. We do not enjoy dealing with your aftermath. Anyway, so there's not a lot of character development. The ending is as you expect. Faust gets dragged down to hell. He doesn't repent. And that's it. Morality tale over. So that's Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus is a story of Faust being damned because of his arrogance, wishing to have knowledge beyond the scope of humans. So it's Faust's arrogance that damns him. And the devil in Marlowe's Faust is very much a English Protestant devil that will get very, very fleshed out in Milton's Paradise Lost in about less than a century from this point. The concept of the devil as being in opposition to God, the usurper upstairs, not Jupiter. We don't have these sorts of conflicts in my family. Like, in my family, nobody is trying to take somebody else's place. Okay, Auntie Hera. But Auntie Hera, okay, once, Auntie Hera, she never did that one again. Not us. We don't want it. Are you kidding? We don't want it. We are not analogues of the devil. So in my family, this just doesn't happen. Okay? For some reason, you guys have decided to create, instead of gods who are wholesome and who, okay, bad things happen, but that's the nature of the world. It's not deliberate and it's not personal. You decided to create a oppositional forces of good and evil. That doesn't. That was probably the stupidest idea you possibly could have come up with. Really? An equal and opposite force for that? Ugh. I mean, look, bad things happen. Apollo is great life healing, but he also kills people. Artemis is the great virgin, but she also kills women in childbirth. You know, it's just the light and dark. Everyone has duality within them. But that's my family. You guys decided you didn't like my family and went and someone else deal with the consequences. So it very much reflects that concept that if there is a God in heaven, there must be a devil in hell. And therefore, this is an oppositional force that is equal to God. So it's like, if that's how the devil works in your theology, then you actually have two gods. You have God and the devil, and they're a God of light and God of dark, which is, I think, a little bit confusing and probably not what you intended, but that's how it reads. Now, to Goethe. Goethe is probably the most famous Faust. Goethe is the one that includes all the German elements. So one of the things that Marlowe doesn't include is Marguerite or Gretchen, the girl. As I said, very underwritten female parts in Marlowe. Goethe writes more of a full Faust legend. However, we only did part 1, because part 2, we'll get to that. But in Goethe's Faust actually starts out a little bit differently. In Goethe's Faust, God and Mephistopheles, who is actually the devil in Goethe's Faust, not a servant of the devil, but Mephistopheles is the devil himself, make a wager. Faust is already a bit iffy, morally speaking. He could go one way or the other. And so God and the devil make a pact, a deal, a bet, sort of like they did with Job. But Mephistopheles has learned something since Job. Mephistopheles has definitely learned something since Job. And Mephistopheles is like, I live to serve. Because in this theology, the devil doesn't always wish to be in contact with God, because he is the force of evil in the world, and yet he is still subordinate to and serves the will of God, which is a really interesting thing. There is a line in the play where he introduces himself, and he says, "I am he who always wills we evil always, and always works good." So that's a really it's the ambiguous quality of this. This devil is less the incarnation of evil as a trickster. He's more like Hermes, brother cousin Hermes. Brother cousin Hermes is a Catholic god. He is a guider of the dead. He's also the god of thieves. And even though thieving is wrong, they still get their own god, because Hermes just likes to do that. Almost every culture has a trickster god. And the devil seems to, within Germanic culture, take the role of the old trickster god. You should see Hermes when he's in his Norse imagery. That's always fun. You should see him in his Norse costume. Whew. That's definitely a tricky god. But anyway, so in this, Mephistopheles and God have a wager over Faust's soul. So can Faust turn to the good while being tempted with the evil? Is he going to turn good? This is the bet that Goethe's God and Mephistopheles have. Now, Faust, it turns out, is likewise when the Dr. Faustus that we met with Marlowe, he's a scholar, he's bored, he is tired of life, he is actively contemplating killing himself, and he only doesn't do this because he hears the Easter songs. That is the point where Mephistopheles gets an in. That is the point because he does not put the cup down because he has seen the light and turned towards God. He puts the cup down because he's distracted by memories of childhood, not because he has actively turned towards the good. He is still ambiguous, and he has managed to do a thing that is considered very bad. Within that particular schema of morality, I'm not judging. We don't judge. I mean, the dead are the dead. Doesn't matter how they ended up the dead. The dead are the dead. Anyway, Faust goes out. It's Easter. All the people are out and they're having a great time. He's being quite distracted by this, and a poodle. He meets a poodle in the street, and the poodle follows him home. And he talks to the poodle, and the poodle's very nice and very, very nice, and comes and sits, and Faust contemplates, maybe I will translate the Bible. And as he's starting to think about translating the Bible into the common tongue, and he's then taking the, doing what one does with translations, but of course this is being the Bible, and therefore this starts to sound a bit, they get a bit touchy about this anyway. The dog just starts yapping and yapping and yapping and yapping, and then starts transforming shape, and poof! Hello? Hello? Who are you? I'm the devil, Mephistopheles. I've just come, thought I'd pop by. And Faust is like, will you stay and will you talk to me about things and tell me about the heavens and the earth and all this knowledge that I don't have? And Mephistopheles is like, can you open up the pentagram on the door jamb so that I can get out again? And Faust is stupid enough to think, oh, I've captured the devil. Maybe I will just keep him here prisoner. And the devil's like, fine. And he calls forth spirits, and they lull Faust to sleep. And Mephistopheles is like, right, ratties, come out. You want to gnaw that top point off that? Thank you. And he slips out. Because he said, look, I'll come back, but Faust doesn't want to let him go. So it's like, you're kidding. But then the next night he comes back, and Faust is, okay, I will give you my soul if you can give me a moment of transcendent bliss. If you serve me and give me a moment of transcendent bliss, I will then serve you. And Mephistopheles is like, yeah, sure, fine. I need you to write it down on a piece of paper. Any bit of paper, don't care. Bit of paper, write it down. In blood. Thanks. Good. All right, deal. Transcendent bliss for service. Good deal. What do you want? What do you want? And Faust is like, I want a girl. I want a beautiful girl. Well, first of all, they have to get him looking the part. So they go to a witch, and the witch gives him a potion so that he is rejuvenated. And then he wants a fine, saucy wench. No, actually, he doesn't want a fine, saucy wench. He wants a fine girl, because he's never really been good at this whole, getting girls thing. And so he they go and he sees a girl called Marguerite, and he sees her in the street, and he goes and talks to her, and she's like, I don't talk to strange men in the street. But he does seduce her. See, he seduces her with jewels, and she starts talking to her neighbor of, I met this guy and he's kind of cute and blah, 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 blah. And he's offering her beautiful things. The first chest of jewels actually gets taken by her mother and given to the priest, because her mother's like, when Marguerite in innocence shows her, look at this that turned up, her mother's like, well, that can't be good. We're poor people. We don't have that. Get rid of it. I'm gonna give it to the priest. I'm gonna give it to the church to get rid of it, because it can't possibly be coming from somewhere good. So the second chest, this is the beginning of Marguerite's corruption. Because the second chest, she then lies to her mother. She doesn't tell her. She goes to her neighbor, who's waiting to see if her husband is alive or dead, and she goes, and it's like, oh, well, I can wear my jewels here and don't tell mum. So she starts being corrupted from that point onwards. The whole thing of Faust is that ultimately Faust's temptation spreads out. He corrupts other people, and he spreads misery with other people. Personally, I don't know why you would ask a being that you believe is utterly infernal and utterly evil to do anything in relation to the world of love. Not when you have, just at your beck and call, the mighty Aphrodite, my great aunt. I mean, the mighty Aphrodite, she is just sitting there waiting for that one. It's like, hello. Oh, yes, I can do that. She can do anything. Really, she can. You do not need to ask infernal realms to help you with love. The mighty Aphrodite is far better at that. But I digress. Anyway, Faust seduces Marguerite. Marguerite, in being seduced, manages to accidentally kill her mother with the sleeping potion that Faust has given her, and then she drowns the baby that Faust gets her pregnant with, and Faust kills her brother. Because he kills her brother before she accidentally kills her mother. I think after she accidentally kills her mother, but before she drowns the baby. Because before she even is sort of like fully aware that she's like, before Faust realizes, oh, she's pregnant, he's already dumped her and gone off with Mephistopheles, because he just wanted to get him some. But in the meantime, he has destroyed an entire family. And Marguerite is an agent in this. So, because she was tempted by him, she walked off the right track. And it's kind of really quite hypocritical that her sexual acts are moving off the straight and narrow, but that isn't enough to damn Faust, him going with some girl and then dumping her. There's actually very little moral thing. That is something that is, I think, a bit of a blind spot in this, because again, it's that dumping on the girl for not keeping herself pure, whereas like Faust is like, this isn't the thing that gets you damned. You wrecked an entire family. No, it's this. It's like double standard, man, double standard. So anyway, Faust has been completely distracted by a witch's sabbat. I mean, he obviously has to be distracted for some time, because A, he didn't realise she was pregnant, which means he disappeared long before she started realising she was missing periods. And so she has not only, she has had the baby and she's given birth and she has drowned the baby and she has been caught for that and she has been tried and she is awaiting execution. And when Faust hears this, he rushes to her using, Mephistopheles provides him with horses. He can't change anything of the of the court order, because the court is ordained by God, and he is within his own weird little sphere still subordinate to God. Because Faust had to leave because he killed Valentine, Marguerite's brother, but he didn't take her with him. He didn't do anything to protect her. He just saved himself, and then Mephistopheles distracted him from, I feel bad about killing her brother, maybe. So he comes and tries to get her out of the prison cell. Doesn't work. She won't leave. She does the thing that Faust won't do, which is she turns towards God, dies, is judged, dies, saved. Faust and Mephistopheles leave, and that's the end of the part one. Now, part two doesn't come until 24 years later. That's a long time to wait for a sequel. Unless it's Twin Peaks, in which case it's 25 years. But nevertheless, it's a very long time to wait for a sequel. And when it comes to this particular version of Faust, the author is relying on people already being familiar with the tale. Again, this version of Faust has a lot of religious stuff in it that is... And the religious, taking so much time over the religious and theological stuff really has an impact on the character development. Faust is kind of an a-hole at the beginning, and he's still an a-hole at the end. Marguerite has the most development, but we don't see it. Most of what happens with her happens off stage. We see very little about her. So that kind of leaves you empty. Mephistopheles, of course, has no development because Mephistopheles is an eternal. Eternals don't change. It's in their nature. Goethe is definitely relying on people knowing the story. He is relying on that. In the second half of the play, the second part of Faust, a lot of that is usurpation of our myths, our stories, my family, and ultimately Faust does redeem himself, because although he gets that moment of bliss, he does do good. So the devil gets to keep his soul, but God won the wager. It's kind of a confused ending. So yeah, the second part usually is not performed and is not gone into the public, into the general concept when you say Faust. Now, because these are two interpretations, and they're both heavily religious interpretations of this, they don't really, beyond the outliney sketch, resemble what has happened to it subsequently. Probably there are the two big operas, the Gounod and the Berlioz opera thing, The Damnation of Faust, which has gorgeous music. The Gounod, I like, but it's okay. It's okay. But it has the same sorts of flaws that the Goethe has. Obviously, not the big religious heaviness, but in terms of the narrative, it's got the same sorts of flaws that Goethe's Faust has in terms of character development being a little underdone. Not that you expect operas to have really heavy character development. But most famously, Faust has come into the public lexicon as a deal with the devil, as selling your soul to the devil for powers and riches. It's become shorthand for people who've done really terrible things for power and wealth. So it's very much, neither of these plays reflect really the modern concept or even the old fable concept. The Faustian bargain is a bargain that you will regret. It is a bargain that you go into and you say, you know what I have to pay for this is probably not worth what I'm getting out of it. So we talk about Faustian bargains in that way, but neither of the plays actually have that exact kind of Faustian bargain. They're slightly different. The power of the myth, the power of the actual story, is that it can hold all of these interpretations. I do think one of the most interesting parts of it is the idea that you would turn to the father of lies and the source of all evil for love. Seems like completely stupid, but as we see in Faust, he doesn't actually want love. He wants to sate his lust. Marguerite does fall in love with him, and that is her tragedy, because he uses her pure feelings against her to do things that she knows is wrong, and that he is just going to dispose of her anyway when it's convenient. So that element of it, I think Marguerite is tragic, but Faust himself is not tragic. Faust himself is a pretty awful person. He's a pretty awful person who does rather deserve to get damned. Goethe's Faust is less cathartic than Marlowe's Faust, because Marlowe's Faust ends with that dragging down to hell, whereas Goethe's Faust just ends up with Faust and Mephistopheles leaving the stage after Marguerite is saved. This is probably a less satisfying ending. I certainly found it less satisfying. Milwaukee Family Players really wanted to do another Dragging Down to Hell, but they just couldn't. They are both interesting plays in their own rights, but depending on what you are expecting out of this story is going to depend on how you read it. There's a lot in there that, if you're not really engaged with the theology, you're going to be bored. It's kind of like, why am I reading this? Why is this important? I really don't care. I'm just after a story about a man who sold his soul to the devil. So that becomes a little bit, from a performance experience, from an experience of this, bit tedious, because both have a different agenda, and their agenda is probably not yours. If your agenda is a nice night at the theatre, it's probably not yours. Being lectured to about morality gets a bit boring. Any morality lectures get boring. And I think that's where different adaptations become more interesting, is when you strip out a lot of the morality stuff out of it and just look at it as a really cruddy deal, then it becomes more interesting. Berlioz has a really interesting option in that Faust actually doesn't commit to giving his soul except it's to rescue Marguerite. So he actually damns himself in an act of self-sacrifice, which is a really interesting, different thing. That gives that character a whole different edge if he is damning himself out of self-sacrifice out of love for another human being who he has very badly wronged. So that is a very different option. And then you get into something like the 20th century, where you take something like Bedazzled, where it's here's a deal and it's all signed. Did you notice the devil is very legalistic? Very legalistic, likes to have that paperwork done. Not like the old days, not like, you sacrifice a goat, burn bits, and then ask and boom, all good. I guess goats went out of fashion. I don't know. But anyway, very legalistic. But you get Bedazzled, the selling your souls for 7 wishes. And of course, being the devil, it's like, yeah, but you got to make it work. If you don't make it work, and you want perfection for something that's imperfect. Good luck with that. So the idea of Faust is incredibly durable. We use it regularly, continually. It keeps coming up. These two plays are possibly not exactly what you think they are because of their age and their focus. But it's not the Faust story as such that is the issue. It's the choices the playwrights made in how they were going to use this material, because the material is older than they are. It's a folk tale. And like a folk tale, unless you imbue those characters with more human qualities, you aren't going to get development, because folk tales don't work like that. Folk tales don't have narrative progression. They have, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. There isn't a lot of causal links in those. And because there isn't a lot of causal links in those, if you don't add those causal links, what happens is you end up with a less satisfying narrative. Both of these plays do not really add the causal links, which means less satisfying overall theatre experience. Ultimately, they're both good, but they're not probably what you think they are going in. They are much more theological than you would expect for something. If what you're expecting is something nice and fun, playing with the idea of the devil and being bad, there are other things to have a look at. But these are actually a lot more intellectual and considering much deeper things than the reputation that precedes them. So keep that in mind before you go and have a look at either of these. So anyway, that's that from me. So I'm going to be off, and I think we might have a little visit, because it's been a while. It's been about a year. I think we could have a nice little visit from our very good, close, personal friend, now that he's got his passport, Mr. Beckett. So, until then, bye-bye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.